We're going to simplify the following trig identities using Pythagorean identities. As you recall, we know that sine squared so as you recall, sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta equals 1. And this is just going to equal cosine squared, because all I'm doing is subtracting sine squared from both sides. And then similarly, you can subtract sine squared from both sides, or cosine squared from both sides, and you're going to get sine squared. Alright, the next problems we have are these. I'm going to go ahead and use the fact that a minus b times a plus b equals a squared minus b squared. So my a is secant, and my b is 1. And our identities for, Pythagorean identities for this one is tan squared of theta plus 1 equals secant squared of theta. So if you subtract 1 from both sides, if you subtract 1 here, you're going to get this equals tan squared of theta. And similarly, this is going to be cosecant squared minus 1. And based off the identity that 1 plus cotan squared of theta equals cosecant squared of theta, if you subtract 1 from both sides, if I subtract 1 here, that goes away. This is going to equal cotan squared of theta. Okay, the next one is this one. So I think on this one I'll go ahead and distribute. So you get sine of theta times cosecant of theta minus sine squared of theta. And then what we're going to do is write this as sine of theta times 1 over sine of theta minus sine squared of theta. Well, this just equals 1. So 1 minus sine squared of theta equals cosine squared of theta. And similarly, I'm going to go ahead and distribute this. Simplify secant. You can put that in fraction form if you want. What we have is this equals 1, so that all cancels out. So 1 minus cosine squared of theta equals 1. And the next one is this one. I'm going to go ahead and simplify here. We know from the previous video that secant squared minus 1 is tan squared of theta. So that was this piece. And this piece from the previous slide, we know that this is going to be cotan squared of theta. So if I write these in terms of sine and cosine, you get sine squared of theta over cosine squared of theta times cosine squared of theta over sine squared of theta. This all cancels out to equal 1. And the last one we have is this one. I'm going to go ahead and simplify the numerator. That's cosine squared of theta over cosine squared of theta minus 1. Now this doesn't equal sine squared. But what I can do is I can take my equation and multiply it by 1, meaning 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the numerator by -1 and the denominator by -1. When I do that, -1 divided by -1 equals 1, so we're not changing it, we're just making it easier to simplify. So if you distribute the -1 here at the bottom, the denominator, you're going to get negative cosine squared of theta plus 1. And the numerator is going to be negative cosine squared of theta. So basically, I can write this as negative cosine squared of theta over 1 minus cosine squared of theta. Now this equals sine squared. So now we have negative cosine squared of theta over sine squared of theta, and that equals negative cotan squared of theta. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Have a very nice day. Bye-bye.